The Feminist Tradition in the South by Kenzie Luttrell and Molly Silvestrini. After the destruction of the Civil War, many Southern women began to organize and demand their rights. Although women were not guaranteed the right to vote until 1920, women's suffrage in the South was prevalent over 50 years before. Southern women were pivotal to the suffrage movement, and despite many misconceptions and stereotypes of Southern feminists, we argued that the feminist tradition runs through the heart of the American South. The birth of feminism in the South. During the Civil War, Southern women joined abolitionists to ensure that the war would end slavery. These were the first Southern feminists. To guarantee a Union victory and the abolition of slavery, many Southern women raised money for the Union Army, worked as nurses, sent supplies to the Union Army during the Civil War. The Women's Loyal National League even monetarily supported Harriet Tubman in her work. This shows the relationship between Southern feminists and Black Americans. Thus, the feminist tradition in the South was born out of a desire to end slavery.
After the Civil War ended, women were excluded from the post-Civil War expansion of suffrage and could still not vote. During this time, women were active in labor, race, politics, and gender equality discourses throughout the South. Black Southern women were a significant part of the national women's rights narrative. In addition, Southern women redefined politics itself by utilizing households, schools, and other public places as spaces of political debate.
Women's suffrage in the South. Southern feminists were a generation behind their Northeastern sisters due to industrialization and urbanization in the North. However, after the Civil War, Southern women joined progressive reform efforts to help the poor, children, and even Southern Blacks. These efforts by Southern feminists were to rebuild the South. This social cohesion in the South among women produced the American Women's Suffrage Association in 1869. Years later, middle-class Southern white women began to demand their right to vote. The race-gender split of 1869. After the Civil War, women aided Black men in their fight for enfranchisement. With the passage of the 15th Amendment, it would give Black men the right to vote and not women. Thus, racism grew among Southern white women as a result. The two groups split in 1869 as racial tensions rose, and abolitionists moved to advocate for Black enfranchisement, leaving women to fight alone. No longer were the two groups fighting alongside each other, but they were now fighting against each other. This prompted Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony to say that Black men were, quote, more hostile to women than any class of men in the country. The split promoted the lost cause narrative, and Southern women would have to wait another half-century for their right to vote. Challenges for women's suffrage in the South. Regional challenges, both social and religious, presented a challenge for many Southern feminists. They were expected to be dainty, gentle, ladylike, and submissive. These challenges kept many women from organizing into groups. Even in the religious South, in the Bible Belt, they used Ephesians 5:22 that says, "Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord." Despite these challenges, many newspapers revealed that the South was not entirely opposed to the women's suffrage movement. However, women's suffrage did not gain momentum in the South until 1910, when the new women of the New South became interested in social reform.
Previous social science scholarship has perpetuated the idea that the South does not have a strong history of feminism. Some common historical misconceptions about the South include there were no feminist movements in the South, feminism was a social agenda pursued solely by Northern women, and Southern feminists are rare and have little influence in pursuing social activism as local initiatives. However, scholars like Dr. Wanda Rushing, a professor of sociology at the University of Memphis, argues that the South was far more integral to the development of feminism than is often thought and wrote about by other scholars. She also argues that both white and black working class women led feminist movements in the South. The misconception that the South did not have feminist movements is due in part to common assumptions, stereotypes, and omissions about the region. Perceptions of the South as a problem-ridden region have perpetuated this stereotype in social science research, as well as the perception that the South is a product of slavery, civil war, segregation, and resistance to civil rights. In addition, the South has a significant religious presence, which is associated with increased conservative values. In her book, Susan M. Shaw presents her experiences as a Southern Baptist in Georgia and her path to becoming ordained as a Southern minister. Although the Southern Baptist Convention strongly discouraged leadership roles for women, Shaw argues that many Baptist Southern women are powerful actors within their families and the church, thus exhibiting independence and agency in their communities. A possible explanation for misconceptions about the South can be due in part to the idea of the lost cause, which is an interpretation of the American Civil War that seeks to defend the South and uphold its way of life. Proponents of the lost cause believe that Confederate soldiers were heroes, slavery was a beneficial system, secession and not slavery caused the Civil War, and Southern women were loyal to the Confederate cause. Proponents of the lost cause, such as the United Daughters of the Confederacy, are responsible for the creation of Confederate memorials in the South, such as the statue of Robert E. Lee. Although there are many misconceptions and stereotypes about the South as a region, including the misconception that the South did not have a strong historical feminist presence, feminism and social movements in the U.S. were significantly shaped by Southern women through their agency and reform efforts. Notable Southern feminists and women's rights advocates include people like Ida B. Wells, the Grimke sisters, Rosa Parks, and Mary Church Terrell.